Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the International Dialogue Center KAICIID and our partners, the Network for Dialogue and the European Council of Religious Leaders, Religions for Peace Europe, and our supporter, the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODIHR, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the European Policy Dialogue Forum 2021 in Lisbon. My name is Aleksandra Đurić-Milovanović, and I'm the project manager of the Network for Dialogue at the International Dialogue Center KAICIID. Together with my colleague, Elena Dini, who is a member of the Network for Dialogue, we will be the MCs during the first 2 days of the forum. Please note that the opening plenary, like all other sessions, are recorded and made available on the online platform. Let me take the opportunity to welcome all participants who are joining forum virtually. It is good to have you. In addition, plenaries are also live streamed on KAICIID's YouTube channel. If you need translation from English to Portuguese or vice versa, you can download the Interreligious application from your phone's app store, and you can log in using the event code for physical participants live Policy Forum and for virtual only Policy Forum. To hear interpretation in Portuguese or English, please use your mobile's headset. You can also find the QR code how to access the application on your table.
The European Policy Dialogue Forum was organized for the first time in 2019 in Athens, Greece. Let's go back to those moments and watch together a 3-minute video.
"70 million people are displaced worldwide as a result of persecution, conflict, or violence. In 2019, more than 500,000 asylum applications were submitted in Europe. When arriving in Europe, refugees face many challenges in their social inclusion process. Although there are policies to support newcomers, they can be slow to adapt to evolving circumstances. This is why the European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants is important, because it builds dialogue without walls. It brings together policymakers, religious leaders, academics, and civil society, such as KAICIID's Network for Dialogue members, to find new and better ways to foster the social inclusion of refugees and migrants. The Network for Dialogue brings together local faith and dialogue actors from a range of European countries to empower interreligious and intercultural action for refugee and migrant inclusion.
The Policy Forum can enable a very unique voice to be promoted and mobilized from faith communities to policymakers, which can help policymakers to think slightly different around approaches to integration of refugees.
The forum provides interactive exchanges where success stories and experiences are translated into further action, strengthening thus the social inclusion of refugees and migrants through dialogue.
And I think the format is also really great, the way that it's been done, like this real emphasis on dialogue and conversation. So there's very few talking heads. It's really about bringing people together to develop solutions.
If you're working in Europe on the social inclusion of refugees and migrants and support them through dialogue, visit us at kaicid.org/refugees and contact us at networkfordialogue@kaicid.org.
It is our first time to organize a hybrid event. Therefore, we kindly ask for your patience for any challenges we might face. The first 2 days are dedicated to the topic of fostering social inclusion and enhancing active participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. We continue with the third day, which is the high-level dialogue on social cohesion that will focus on countering hate speech, efforts in Europe by strengthening cross-sector collaboration between religious and belief actors and policymakers. Physically and virtually, the forum brings together 170 participants from 29 Europe countries, including policymakers, representatives of religious communities from 7 faiths, refugees and migrants, members of civil society, academics, and practitioners. We are particularly interested in how faith-based actors and religious leaders can contribute to that conversation by giving refugees and migrants a stronger voice and allowing them to participate in European society.
Without further ado, we would like to introduce our first speakers. We are delighted to invite the main convener of this forum to the stage and have His Excellency Faisal bin Muammar, Secretary General of the International Dialogue Center KAICIID, to provide the words of welcome to all of you. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Good morning, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. Very honored and delighted to be in Lisbon, beautiful city. We are going to have very enjoyable 3 or 4 days to get to know people and to learn more about this country and the people of Lisbon. Excellencies, Eminence, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and a great honor to address such an esteemed gathering at our 3rd annual European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants. For this forum, which has been organized jointly with our partners, the Network for Dialogue, initiated by KAICIID in 2018, and the European Council for Religious Leaders, Religion for Peace Europe, with the kind support of the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. There could be, in my view, hardly be a more appropriate location than a beautiful, vibrant, and hospitable Lisbon. Portugal is indeed the appropriate place to exchange views on how best to foster social inclusion and enhance participation of refugees and migrants in host societies, a country which, in the words of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, has consistently been a champion of refugees' cause. I extend to all of you on-site and remote participants a very warm welcome, and I am also pleased to welcome among us today Her Excellency Claudia Pereira, Secretary of State for Integration and Migration of the Republic of Portugal. Thank you for joining us. Distinguished guests and friends, KAICIID for over a decade has been a pioneer in promoting interreligious and intercultural dialogue and in working towards bridging the gap between religious leaders and policymakers. Because we believe that it is only through an inclusive dialogue that we can together address the challenges and threats that face humanity, among which what is now known as the 3 Cs: conflict, climate change, and unfortunately, COVID-19. KAICIID, since its inception, has been working on this issue, pertaining to social inclusion, common citizenship, and combating hate speech. It is these very concepts that need to be strengthened and promoted for migrants and refugees to be fully fledged participants in their host communities, people like you and I, who are seeking to establish a meaningful life and a sense of belonging. A few months ago, KAICIID with the support of the Network for Dialogue published 3 policies briefs based on the discussion of last year's forum organized by KAICIID and the Network for Dialogue and supported by the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European Commission representation in Germany. The 3 policy forum briefs discuss how intercultural and interreligious dialogue are means to further social inclusion of refugees and migrants in Europe in the areas of inclusive education, trust building, and changing the often negative narrative on migration. Ladies and gentlemen, our theme for this year's forum is fostering social inclusion and enhancing participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. And the discussion and networking that will be taking place today and tomorrow fits well into the global debate regarding good integration practices and social inclusion models in the context of communities where refugees and migrants are living, and builds on last year's theme, fostering social inclusion and enhancing participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. We all gather here today to discuss, exchange views, and learn from each other, religious leaders, policymakers, experts, activists, and stakeholders, and lessons learned from practices of social inclusion, integration, and participation. I trust by working together in a positive partnership, we shall overcome many of our difficulties we face and indeed serve the causes of harmony and peaceful coexistence and promote sustainable development for all. When we speak of fostering social inclusion and participation in any given context, more so in this forum context, we speak of multidimensional process that involves social, political, cultural, and economical aspects, and one that operates at various levels of any given societies. Working together towards social inclusion and participatory process requires principles of inclusivity, integration, cooperation, a sense of belonging and trust, and an overall strong positive relationships. Moreover, we need to make use of insight from experiences on forthcoming ideas of how to best support social cohesion and participation in host communities. At the end of the day, it is about people and their capabilities of opportunities. It is also about celebrating diversity that will help us manage the rapidly changing world around us. And this requires leadership. This required leadership from every one of us. It requires all of us to inspire, to influence, to challenge, to have the will, and to be determined. We need to involve all levels of societies as we work towards better inclusion and participation of refugees and migrants in their new-found home. This sense of common humanity that is translated on the ground is the vision of today and tomorrow's world, our global world. Together, we are able to build the bridges of partnerships We don't want only to build the bridges, we want to cross the bridge to the other side. As strong, durable, and remarkable as Vasco Gama Bridge. We want to do the same thing. As we work together towards healthier, more inclusive communities where refugees and migrants have dignity, security, and the opportunities to lead a better life and give back to their host environment. I sincerely believe and hope you will enjoy today and tomorrow plenaries and working session, and I wish us all to have an interactive discussion with such distinguished and enlightened participants. Thank you all for your participation. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for providing the opening remarks and welcoming our participants. We are highly appreciative of your support for this forum, not only this year, but from the very beginning in 2019. You are a strong believer that such a forum makes a difference, and we hope that all of you can experience that over the next 3 days. During 2021, Portugal and Slovenia have held the EU presidency. Therefore, we would like to welcome our keynote speakers from these two countries. We are very honored to have our first keynote speaker, Her Excellency Cláudia Pereira, Secretary of State for Integration and Migration of Portugal. The intervention will be in Portuguese, and those who need the interpretation can use the application that was mentioned, Interreligious, for translation. Portugal is known to be a welcoming country for refugees and migrants, and we are looking forward to learning more from you. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Good morning, bom dia. I would like to compliment everyone and to say that although we have agreed it will be in Portuguese, given that most of the participants are foreigners, I will switch to English. So I will, although I have my presentation in Portuguese, I will try to do my best to translate into English. So I would, thank you. Thank you. So I would like to compliment Mr. Muammar, Secretary General of the International Dialogue Center, to compliment also Mrs. Fajon, Deputy of European Parliament, to compliment all the political decisors, heads of public organisms and civil society, and all the ones who are online and present, all the speakers and participants. It is really an honor to be in this forum, in the opening session, and it's an honor to host this forum in Lisbon. And we especially invest and value the intercultural and the interreligious dialogue and politics for integration and migration. So we are very, very happy with this forum taking place in here. Many thanks for that. I have 5 strong messages, but we can resume it in one strong message. In our government, and I will give the perspective of Portugal, and then we look forward to learn with the experience of all the countries here represented. But our main message is that in all the politics of the Portuguese government, what we do look for is to integrate in all the measures also the migrants and refugees. For instance, politics for housing. We assure that migrants and refugees have access. Politics of employment. We assure that migrants and refugees have access, that they do not have obstacles, first, and secondly, that they have information how to access. So that is our main aim is to include migrants and refugees in all the measures of the government. And that we do by two mechanisms. First, to assure the information, to spread the information, and the High Commissioner for Migration has spread the information in more than 25 languages to municipalities, civil society, and secondly, to remove obstacles like in the documentation. There is still a lot to be done, but also a lot has already been done. And in the two, we have four main points in our program of the government, and two of them are directly related with migrants. First, the strategical challenge of demography. We need migrants also for our demography, and we want to ensure more life quality and more dignity. And secondly, our second main point of our axis of our government program is to reduce inequalities, and in that sense also including migrants. We have for the last 25 years our first High Commissioner for Migration and Ethnic Minorities. So it's already been 25 years doing this interconnection between different sections of the government. And on one hand, we have to ensure that we have the structures for integration of migrants and refugees, but at the same time, migrants have deeply contributed to our society, socially, culturally, linguistically, demographically, economically. And I would like to point one example. For instance, according to the Migration Observatory, in 2019, the contribution of migrants to the social security system was 884 million euros. So, between what the migrants contributed, 995 millions, and what they received, 111 millions, the social security system of Portugal benefited only from migrants, 884 million euros. And this is because the large majority, 81%, is active population, so they come here to work. Like the Portuguese go abroad to work. So most of the population, immigrant and refugee population, are employed. And so, because of that, the social security system also benefits. This is one of the contributions that we really would like to share, and we hope to also learn how in other countries what is a contribution to the social security system. And as I said, our aim is always to have included in all the measures the migrants and refugees. And so we have a multi-level approach, because we have an intervention that is national from the government, regional, and then also local. At the same time, we have also an approach that is multi-sectorial. So, assuring that in housing politics, migrants and refugees are included, education, health, employment, learning of Portuguese language. So in this sense, it's multi-sectorial. And then multi-partners. We strongly try to promote the articulation between public services and civil society. And this was particularly helpful during the pandemic. Speaking about the migration policies in sharing the information and removal of the obstacles, we and with the High Commission for Migration have developed a structure of centers in Portugal in that they are extremely helpful in assuring that information reaches migrants, but also reaches mayors and other public institutes. So we have 4 national centers for migrants. They work like a one-stop shop, where migrants have translators, they can go to Social Security, to the National Service of Borders and Migration, or they can look for employment, all in the same space. So this is a one-stop shop for migrants. Then and we are a country of 10 million people, but still very diverse. We have across the country, north, south, interior, in the islands, we have 128 local centers to integrate migrants. So most of them are in municipalities. So in the municipalities, when a resident goes to pay the bills or to ask information, in 128, you also have someone there specifically prepared to attend migrants, and whatever questions they may have according to the documentation or where to put the children at school or other questions. Then we also have 23 cabinets of professional integration of migrants. We have more for all the residents, but because many times migrants have specific questions of documentation, these ones have a special preparation. We have a phone line to support migrants that in 2020 received 106 calls, specially vocated for migrants. And then we also have a translation line, and this was very, very important during all the years, but especially in pandemic. And we have revised the Portuguese language courses, and we are also starting to revise the Portuguese online platform. Then I also would like to say, and in connecting the different actors, religious actors, political, civil society, it was very important for us, the Global Compact of Migration from the United Nations. Basically, in the end of 2019, with the Global Compact of Migration, we started to meet state secretaries every month, public institutes to meet every month, and the ministers every 3 months. And what we did in these meetings was to solve what needed to be improved for migrants, to see what the removal of obstacles. For instance, we could see that it was difficult for many of them to have access to the social security system while they were waiting for their residence permit. So we just did the number of social security system in the hour, which means they did not have to wait for the residence permit to have the social security number. This may be very simple, but it took a lot of effort, and then many migrants could be regularized through this system. We also have simplified the renewal of residence permits. They were manual, and they became, most of them, automatic. So this is a work in progress. But the Global Compact of Migration was very important for us to reinforce our all-of-government approach concerning migrants. Then we are also very committed in settling and integrating refugees, and more recently, the Afghans, like many countries.
Good morning.
In about 1 month and a half, we have received 251 Afghans, and children are already in school, and some of these Afghans are already starting to work, and so we are deeply committed with this effort. Then thirdly, the COVID-19. Again, the Global Compact for Migration of the United Nations was very important because we have reinforced our networks inside the government and with the local administration, the municipalities, and with the public institutes. As soon as pandemic arrived, we just issued a decree to ensure that no migrant would suffer for awaiting their residence permit. So we issued a decree in which the migrants were automatically regularized temporarily during the pandemic, which means they could have any right that any Portuguese has. For instance, the ones who the employers could give the layoff to the migrant employees who are undocumented. They could receive the unemployment also support and other social supports. Then we also have extended the validity of documents. So any Portuguese, like the car card or the passport, or so as the same way any residence permit became valid until the end of 2021, so that no one would be left behind for their document not to be valid. So again, we tried to issue measures to everyone in Portugal, never leaving behind the migrants, but assuring they had access. Then also regarding the vaccination plan, we have created a platform. We were aware that still many migrants did not have the health number. So we created a platform for migrants who were undocumented and did not have the health number so that they could register. And then we also created the open house for vaccination to everyone, including migrants who were undocumented. And like this, we could assure the vaccination of nearly all the migrant population in Portugal and the residents in Portugal. So now we can say that we have 85% of the population in Portugal vaccinated, including migrants and refugees. Thank you. Additionally, all these measures regarding testing, vaccination, they were translated to more than 25 languages by the High Commissioner for Migration. And they were sent to health centers, to municipalities, to migrant associations, refugees associations, so that everyone could have access to this, to the information of these measures. And lastly, stressing on the intercultural and interreligious dialogue, we are multicultural and multireligious, and in Portugal we have 189 nationalities. In our population, 7% are migrants. And although the society is mainly Roman Catholic, we have many religious traditions, Judaism, Islamism, together with Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, Zoroastrians, and cosmovisions of African visions. And in the book, Cosmo in Portuguese, Religious and Spiritual Cosmovisions, a study published by the High Commissioner for Migration and produced by the area of Religion Sciences of Lusófona University, there are in Portugal 76 groups of spiritual and religious cosmovisions. So for us, having 189 nationalities and having 76 groups of religious cosmovisions, it's a source of richness. Again, we are 10 million, a small country, but with a very big diversity, which is really a source of richness. And with our intercultural and interreligious dialogue, we want to promote more and more that richness. In the High Commission for Migration, what we also have been promoting is spaces for persons of different religions and nationalities to meet and to know better each other. And so there are 5 programs that are particularly insightful. First, the network of schools for intercultural education. It's a network of the schools from north to south of the country. They meet usually every month and they discuss difficulties they have in schools with more than 40 nationalities and particular procedures they should improve so that every student feels integrated in the school. Secondly, we have teams of intercultural mediators. They are in municipalities bridging the migrants and refugees with the services of hospitals, of schools, of really making bridges between for them to better integrate. And this has been very, very effective, again, specifically in pandemic. We also have interreligious meetings, the MEET, which is focused on the young people from different religious communities, and they organize initiatives together and to better meet each other and to always integrate the most vulnerable young people. And then the interreligious dialogue group. They meet every month, 14 religious communities since 2015, and they have been very, very interesting initiatives. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that contributes for peace between religions in Portugal. So all these initiatives, together with others, they really assure a feeling of social inclusion. Of course, again, we need to do more, but a lot has been done in this sense. And to end, our main message is that to be integrated is to participate religiously, socially, and also politically, and also in health. And so I would like to give 3 examples. Again, just to stress that having 85% of the population vaccinated, among them being undocumented and documented migrants and refugees, means participation from everyone, from different associations, government, municipalities, Ministry of Health. This means really network being accomplished, and so this is one of the examples. Secondly, last month we had elections for mayors at the municipalities, and we have increased in 10% the migrants who are going to vote. And so that this is also means participation, political and civic participation. And thirdly, we also have increased the number of migrants that were being candidates themselves to be elected. And so this means also political participation. So what we will try to promote, and we will definitely promote, is to have this, and as the Minister Muammar said, is the interaction, to create and foster spaces of interactions, of working together. And this is one of the main messages that we have from the pandemic, the need to work together. So we will keep assuring that in every measures of the government, migrants and refugees are always included, and continuously working integration. Many thanks, and I wish a very insightful forum for all of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for delivering keynote remarks and for introducing some of the most relevant issues of participation and integration, which we are planning to discuss over the next 2 days. Thank you. Our second keynote speaker is Ms. Tania Fajon, member of the European Parliament, who prepared a recorded video for the opening of the forum. Let's hear her message.
Dear guests, speakers, and participants of the third European Policy Dialogue Forum on Refugees and Migrants. It is a great pleasure to address you all at the start of this 2-day conference, where you will be discussing one of the most important but also divisive issues of our generation, migration and asylum. First of all, allow me to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate at this important conference. Unfortunately, I cannot be there with you in person in beautiful Lisbon. However, allow me to convey my warmest regards from Slovenia and the European Parliament. I truly believe that no matter how contentious the problems we are facing or the topics we are debating are, only through dialogue can we address the concerns and find common solutions. That is why this conference is so important. Management of migration and asylum policies in Europe have been too often abused for scoring domestic political points, or have been the scapegoats for blindsiding public opinions for every other issue people care about, such as corruption, increasing inequalities, failing health systems, privatization of public services, or even high energy prices, if you will. Europe is the richest continent, and the right to asylum has been born from the bloodiest war of the 20th century. Asylum is one of the greatest civilization achievements of Europe's survival and struggle. It is clear that Europe cannot solve all the problems in the world alone, nor that it can accommodate more than 80 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, a heartbreaking and a total record number of those in need of aid, fleeing wars and persecution. This number is only likely to increase due to climate change and major political events we are all facing, such as most recently Afghanistan. But the reflection of the European Union as a land of opportunity must make us reflect on our strength and our responsibility in the world too. Europe does play its part, and we must therefore also assume our responsibility in the world we help build. This responsibility must also serve to make us more aware of the economic and political tools we have at our disposal to manage human mobility with our partners in the world in a coordinated way, while being attentive to people's rights. I believe that such conferences can help us reflect on the choices to be made to contribute to a global and sustainable approach to the management of migratory movements and wider migrant socio-economic and political issues at stake. I'm convinced that by listening to each other's points of view, we can begin to find common ground for courageous and innovative choices that can finally give countries and the European Union a common approach to policy on asylum and migration, which are built upon dialogue with refugees and migrants themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, for as long as people will be dying at our shores in the Mediterranean and on our borders in the Balkans or in the east with Belarus, where Europe has become a fortress, that Europe shall not be in peace. I believe it is our duty, first of all, to save lives, and it is no longer acceptable to leave their responsibility only to NGOs. We must also ensure that people in need of protection can arrive in the European Union safely without risking their lives. With that, we also tackle traffickers who make billions of euros at the expense of human tragedies, but also Europe's inability to find consensus on migration. The solution is not that difficult. We have to put in place a functioning and holistic European migration policy, combining external and internal dimensions. We therefore need to work together to achieve a good outcome on the latest reform proposed by the European Commission on the Pact for Immigration and Asylum. In particular, we have to work to overcome the Dublin system for genuine cooperation between member states based on a permanent mechanism of solidarity and sharing of responsibility. We must ensure that frontline member states are not left alone and guarantee that migrants and asylum seekers in the EU receive dignified treatment and human life conditions throughout the asylum procedure. I'm convinced that this strategic approach can help us move to a sustainable migration system, which is not a new occurrence or an emergency. And dialogue, again, which is key to achieving all that. I'm sure that this conference will importantly contribute to this European debate. Migration is a historic phenomenon, and migration is and has been a European challenge for quite some years now. But the solution must also be European for common good. Allow me to conclude my message by thanking you again for the invitation. I wish you all a successful conference and many, many fruitful discussions. Stay safe and healthy.
We appreciate the strong and important message from Tanja Fajon of the European Parliament, which gave us an overview of the migration situation and policies in Europe. In the course of the next 2 days, we're going to have one specific aspect in mind, the one of participation of refugees and migrants. After this first part of the introduction, we would like to turn our attention to some housekeeping announcements, which will enable you to feel comfortable and secure during the next 3 days. First of all, as we all know, we still face the COVID-19 pandemic. That's why it is critical for all physical participants to follow the rules of our host country, Portugal, and wear masks inside the plenary halls. We want to appeal to all of you to follow that requirement, although we recognize that this is not always comfortable, but the safety of all of us is important. If you have any doubts about the COVID-19 restrictions, please take a look again at the 2 pages that were shared with you in advance in the forum.
Second, we would like to point out to all our physical participants that you can connect to the Wi-Fi. The code has been handed out to you, and you can find it in a welcome desk as well. Third, as you are also hopefully aware, there is an online platform for the forum at www.policydialogueforum.eu, where you can find the agenda, speakers and their bios, and the input papers prepared for the forum. While the online platform is available to everyone, you can also find the link to the Attendee Hub, which is only available for registered participants for the forum. The Attendee Hub provides you with the opportunity to interact with our participants and moderators through the chat function, polls, and breakout discussions. Thus, you can interact with physical and also virtual participants. Note that you can update your profile there, including your social media profile, so others can find you on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Speaking of social media, if you find the speakers and ideas discussed here interesting, we encourage you to share them. Please use the hashtag #DialogueForInclusion throughout the 3 days of the event. Alexandra has told you about the online platform and the Attendee Hub, to which you have all been invited. While for most virtual participants who are in front of a computer or a laptop, the Attendee Hub is the most convenient way to follow the forum, we also encourage the physical participants to be connected with others during the time of the forum through the Attendee Hub app. You have received an email, and at the registration, you were encouraged to download the C-Event app. And there you have the access to the Attendee Hub. With the app, you can post comments in the chat, pose questions, and participate in the polls.
Thank you, Elena, for mentioning the polls. We encourage you to take now your mobile phones and connect to the C-Event application and log into the forum. We would like to test out the first poll that we have prepared for you and to ask you a very simple question. How do you feel right now? Please take the app and answer using the poll. We encourage you to participate and try. I will give you a few seconds until you can provide your answer.
Hopefully this is working for you all. The poll during this day is going to be really a tool to hear your voice, to hear how things are going. And here we had 5 options. I'm happy to see that most of you so far, you answered the question with motivated as well as excited. So this is helping to really feel the audience. We have someone who is hungry, so don't worry, at some point, really, the coffee break will come. But still, I think we're really happy to see that most of you, like we are excited about the 2 days that we have in front of us. So during the next 2 days, sometimes we will use this tool of the poll, and feel free to let us hear your voice through that. Having said that, we concluded with our housekeeping, and thank you to all of you who joined us in this exercise. Thanks for your patience with us, but we hope that all this information will really allow all of us to feel comfortable, and we hope that you will be active and engage with the app and social media during the time of the conference. Thank you.
The second part of the opening plenary is dedicated to our first panel discussion, Bridging Cultures, Closing Gaps in the Participation of Refugees and Migrants in the Political and Civic Life of Host Societies. This plenary discussion examines the current state of refugees and migrants' participation in their host societies with a focus on challenges and new approaches. We would like also to ask you to take your phones and answer another question using polls available in the application. How involved do you consider refugees and migrants to be in your own communities, activities, and processes? Let's keep in mind that this panel discussion will address this question, and also the answers you will provide, we will come back to them during the discussion. We are delighted to have our distinguished moderator of this session with us, Ms. Amina Khalid, who is the head of Sustainable Communities at Initiatives of Change UK and a member of the Network for Dialogue. Amina will lead you through this initial session with several speakers. Amina, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. What a wonderful and beautiful welcome. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all, wherever you might be joining us from today. It is a great honor for me to welcome you and moderate this very important and timely plenary session on bridging cultures, closing gaps in the participation of refugees and migrants in the political and civic life of host communities. As many of you would agree, the refugees and migrants are often excluded from policy discussions and decision-making due to many factors which may hinder and create blockages, such as the general awareness of opportunities to be active in one's communities, existing national or local initiatives that support the participation, as well as many other factors. It is one thing to be an immigrant and refugee who has the opportunity to participate in different platforms. It's one thing to have the opportunity to be around the table, but for me, I would say the bigger question remains how to sit at the head of the table and to enable an inclusive, equal, and just process where every voice matters. Well, after almost 2 years of isolation and deep disconnection due to COVID-19, we now have a unique opportunity today and in the coming days to engage with the extraordinary people who are making a real difference in our societies. And may I say, who are sowing the seeds of hope for a better tomorrow. And with that said, I have the pleasure to welcome and introduce 5 remarkable, distinguished speakers who are all key experts in the field of migration and social inclusion, interreligious and intercultural dialogue, as well as in the field of policymaking. They will all shed a light in the current state of refugees and migrants' participation in their host, with a focus, of course, on the challenges and new approaches. Together, They will examine and reflect what impediments are refugees and migrants facing across Europe. How can we be more active in participating both in our host and respective countries? How do we encourage everyone to be involved in that very important process? And what are the roles of religious leaders, policymakers, and how can interreligious and intercultural dialogue support that process? Each speaker will have 5 to 7 minutes to make their contribution. Once we've heard from all our speakers, we will open the floor to you all wonderful people. And what we would like all of you to do is to come up with a question to either the specific speaker in which you are interested to put your question forward, or have a more general question which can go to all of our speakers. So now, let us begin with our first speaker of the morning, Ms. Ashwan Khan, who will be joining us virtually. Her speech will primarily focus on the existing collaboration with faith-based organizations in Europe and Central Asia in promoting the inclusion of migrants and refugees with a specific focus on children to address the hearsay narrative and hate speech as a pre-requirement to ensure that migrants and refugees are included in their host communities. But let us all welcome all the rest of the speakers to the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khalid. Distinguished audience, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to address you today and to share with you UNICEF's experience in promoting the inclusion of migrants and refugees in Europe and Central Asia. The issue that brings us all together is very timely. In the first half of this year alone, more than 43,000 migrants and asylum seekers arrived in Europe by sea, often risking their lives in search of a safer future. 1 in 5 of them was a child. The reason why these boys and girls, these children, embark on such dangerous journeys are complex and diverse. Many are fleeing war and conflict. Others are escaping extreme poverty, the worsening consequences of climate change, discrimination, and violence. In terms of legal context, they're seeking to access their most basic rights, including security, health, and education. Many children and young people, especially from North and West Africa, mention a chance at education as the primary motivation for their journey. The obstacles they face often continue long after the end of their journey. For those who manage to reach this region, many challenges still lie ahead. Their efforts of building a new life in a new community and a new country often run headlong into xenophobia, racism, social exclusion, violence, or all of the above. Addressing these issues and ensuring that children on the move are protected, welcomed, and included in their host communities is therefore of vital importance. It requires collective efforts and the navigation of complex and diverse political contexts. Across Europe and Central Asia, UNICEF is working on this issue with governments, UN agencies, other international organizations, civil society, including faith-based organizations. Our shared goals include supporting children on the move and ensuring their rights are understood, protected, and promoted. Many religious leaders and communities of faith have been advocates for the world's children, providing guidance, aid, and comfort. They are often key interlocutors and keepers of delicate balances within both refugee and host communities. Religious communities and organizations have both the status as well as the significant local networks and resources to assist and familiarize migrant and refugee children with the integration process. They can be the difference that ensures that such children can fully participate in the life of their new communities, with the ability to access the support they need. Equally important, they are crucially positioned to influence host communities and promote the values of solidarity, tolerance, diversity, and peace. Across our region, UNICEF is already collaborating closely with such faith-based organizations at different levels. In Italy, for example, partnerships with faith-based organizations have been instrumental in the support that UNICEF provides in the process of inclusion and reinsertion of unaccompanied children and young people in the Italian social fabric. In Georgia, an initiative supported by UNICEF in collaboration with religious leaders and faith actors has succeeded in developing a dialogue on the protection of the rights of migrant and refugee children and contributed to the adoption of the Code on the Rights of the Child. In Turkey, UNICEF partnered with religious leaders to provide protection services in refugee communities, including by ensuring access to psychosocial support and counseling in community centers. In parallel, UNICEF is also engaged in strengthening social cohesion by supporting girls and boys, adolescents and youth in participating in processes that may influence local and national policymaking. To further tap into the potential of the faith community, in December 2020, UNICEF launched From Faith to Action. This is an initiative bringing together a wide range of stakeholders who share one overriding aspiration: to ensure that children escaping conflict, persecution, natural disasters, or poverty are supported and protected physically, psychologically, and spiritually. From Faith to Action started with a conference co-organized by UNICEF as well as the World Council of Churches, the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith and Local Communities, and the European Council of Religious Leaders, Religions for Peace. It was also in collaboration with Islamic Relief Worldwide, A World of Neighbors, and the Lutheran World Federation and World Vision International. These 2 days of fruitful dialogue highlighted several key priority areas for UNICEF's engagement with interreligious organizations in the region to further the goals we're speaking of today. These include facilitating the integration and social inclusion of migrant and refugee children by advocating for better access to social services and bringing host communities and newcomers closer together through fostering empathy, cultivating welcoming practices, and identifying shared spaces. Fostering social cohesion by combating xenophobia and discrimination, including hate speech, and promoting interreligious dialogue by speaking out for peaceful coexistence. Distinguished audience, it was clear to UNICEF then, and it stands so very true today, that tackling fear-based narratives, hate speech, and xenophobia is a crucial role for religious leaders and communities. It will continue to be a critical element in fostering social inclusion and ensuring the full participation of refugees and migrants in host societies. UNICEF sees with great concern the increase in intolerance, xenophobia, discrimination, and racism across Europe, and how these threaten social cohesion. We are seeing highly politicized narratives that support pushback operations and restrictive policies that fuel xenophobic sentiments, specifically putting children and youth at risk of experiencing violence and discrimination. While many countries are making important advancements in tackling misinformation and hate speech, it is equally imperative to address the harmful trend from a civic and social perspective. We see that some faith-based organizations are already increasingly committed and engaged in responding to and countering hate speech, including online. In today's digital world without borders, partnerships with faith-based organizations and interreligious communities have a vital role to play in this regard. They have an almost unique broad reach and can enable a variety of stakeholders to come together to protect the rights of the most vulnerable children. Their efforts can be the difference that results in nurturing a human rights and peace-inspired consciousness and culture among the children and young persons in the host communities. Today, more than ever, we, whether governments, faith organizations, the international community, or citizens, need to keep our universally shared human rights and dignity compass. We strongly believe that the current and future challenges faced by children on the move and in their host societies are primarily created by policies, practices, behaviors, and attitudes. All of these can be changed for the better if we come together to make it happen. UNICEF remains committed to working with all of you to make sure that children, regardless of where they come from and why they got here, can enjoy all of their rights in their new communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Afshan Khan, for your wonderful and remarkable contribution. And I have to say, on a personal level, you really took me to that place of deep, real experience, the challenges you spoke about of racism, discrimination, Islamophobic attitude, which I have experienced at such a young age, growing up in the European continent at the age of 13. And as you talked about the importance of collaboration and the role of faith leaders and interreligious actors to really ensure that we have a more cohesive and collaborative way to address those critical issues, it really has hit me hard, to the core. So I thank you very much for your contribution. Our next speaker is Mr. Pedro Calado, who is, of course, no other than the native of this beautiful and wonderful country that has welcomed us all so well. I must say that it's very important for us to know where we come from in order to know where we're going. So Mr. Pedros will give us the important context of this beautiful country and city, Portugal, Lisbon, where so many of us have been made feel welcome. And for us, especially to look at it from the angle of the political and practical context. Looking at, what is, for instance, Portugal doing to promote interreligious and intercultural dialogue. As a former High Commissioner for Migration, he will give us some concrete examples of the successful initiatives that he has engaged both in the past and currently engaging. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, dear Secretary General of the International Dialogue Center, dear Secretary of State. On behalf of both of you, I salute all the participants and, of course, my colleagues of this panel. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the kind invitation to have the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation today here at this forum. And on the theme of migration, refugees, and diversity, this has been an issue that has been covered by the Foundation since 2003, and it's one of our streamlines of operation. So in the intervention of the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation, we very closely seek to monitor and constructively contribute to the great national and international debates, and in that sense, it's an honor to be here today in this morning. Being the only Portuguese and Lisboner, as our moderator has referred to me in this opening session, gives me an additional responsibility, which I hope to take care of, and that is the one to try and to contextualize the place and the people where and with whom your event takes place. So following hundreds of researches about the Portuguese DNA, Professor Sobrinho Simões from the University of Porto, a very well-known Portuguese pathologist and researcher, he refers to the Portuguese as a remarkable mixture of genes with the most varied origins, saying that if there is something unique or almost unique in us, it is this genetic mixture. And this genetic recipe, highlighting how to cook a modern Portuguese, is the following that I would like to share with you. So, to cook a modern Portuguese, you have to start by warming over low heat a broth of Celts, Iberian and Lusitanian DNA from the early Christian era, adding a pinch of genes from the Middle East during the Roman Empire. From time to time, you have to pour some Berber genes into the pot, and now wait 700 years. I will make it shorter. Now scramble a few handfuls of Arab genes for 5 centuries, the presence of the Muslim in Portugal. As early of the 13th century, as the 13th century increased the heat significantly and reduced the introduction of Arab genes, but without forgetting to continue to sprinkle the mixture with more genes, for instance, from France. From the 15th century, lower the heat and pour some spoons of genes from sub-Saharan slaves and from the Roma into the broth. At the beginning of the 16th century, continue to add African genes until the end of the 19th century, and never forget to periodically season it with genes of Jewish origin. So above all, we, the Portuguese, have always been, in the words of also a Lusophone writer, José Eduardo Agualusa, a crazy combination of genes from everywhere. Despite the presence of other religions in the national territory, before and after the formation of Portugal as a nation, where Muslim and Jewish stand out, Catholic Christian hegemony was characterized the story of the Portuguese society. Only in the second half of the 20th century is that the religious diversity in Portugal begins to gain some expression, namely associated with the more intensified migratory flows from the 60s. But despite this late diversity, also in our religious roots, which many consider homogeneous and consolidated, we find fundamental interreligious and intercultural legacies. Christian worship in Portugal results to a large extent from the absorption of ancestral cultures of evangelized people. In the Portuguese case, Christian worship reflects numerous articulations with the Jewish heritage that played a role in printing dogmas and sedimenting traditions, but also, and for example, various influences from Celtic, Roman, and Endovelian cults, all prior to Christianity. In Portugal, initiatives to promote interreligious dialogue only began to be organized from the beginning of the 70s, and the democratic regime brought greater openness to religious diversity. In this decade, a group of non-Christian communities was also formally constituted, such as the Hindu community and the Islamic community, bringing together believers mainly from Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau in the post-1975 period. The new migratory flows from Brazil, Eastern Europe, and Asia at the beginning of the 21st century contributed decisively to the diversification of the religious panorama in Portugal, and the initiatives of interreligious dialogue were intensified. The beginning of the century was also marked by the passing of the Religious Freedom Law, Law 16 from 2001, which still constitutes the legal framework for religions or confessions established in the country, and establishes a clear separation between the state and the churches or religious communities, but it also defines in the same way a collaboration between them and the state. In 2004, the government created a mission structure for dialogue with religions, an organization that would be integrated in 2007 into the High Commission for Migration. And following that integration, and to strengthen Portugal's intervention in this area, in line with several events of religious intolerance that had occurred in Europe and elsewhere in the world, a working group for interreligious dialogue, as mentioned by the State Secretary, was created in early 2015. In a process in which I had the privilege as former High Commissioner to launch from 2014 to 2019, and that surely other participants in this forum currently in charge of these matters will detail, Portugal has been working with key actors in the Portuguese religious milieu, such as researchers or members of the religious communities, in organizing different activities of recognition and valuing of the religious diversity and providing more informed information on the various cultural and religious matrices of the communities residing in Portugal, namely through the editing and dissemination of teaching materials on these subjects, but also by carrying out the awareness raising and information actions on interreligious dialogue, by participating in events for reflection and debate, by the annual dissemination of a calendar named the Celebration of Time, an interreligious calendar that is yearly distributed, or the establishment of a National Day for Religious Liberty and Interreligious Dialogue, an unanimous decision by the Parliament. These are just examples of a country that can, I believe, showcase very interesting practices, supported, and this is very important, by a media that is normally interested in shaping a constructive narrative. Let me conclude by reinforcing that we live in a plural society, a plurality that is not new, but based on the encounters of peoples and cultures that have always guided this history of our country. A human dimension of this diversity is found in our religious experience, a dimension that requires dialogue between different faiths and religions in order to achieve greater mutual understanding, interreligious harmony and cooperation. The very moral imperatives of all religions, convictions and creeds call for peace, tolerance and mutual understanding, and these communalities have been the drivers of the different religious leaders in Portugal. But however, and I think this is a message that we have to take away, in a plural society, promoting intercultural and interreligious dialogue is not an exclusive matter for minorities, whether cultural or religious, but a learning process that concerns everyone. Civil society organizations, religious communities, schools, universities are invited to learn about the religious diversity of the Portuguese society and to promote interreligious dialogue, committing to a culture of peace and nonviolence, of understanding, interreligious and intercultural harmony and cooperation. Dialogue between civilizations, and let's not forget, and that we sometimes tend to, the non-believers, aiming towards the elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion of belief. Portugal holds an incredible legacy in the meeting of cultures that brings countless opportunities for the current phenomenon on migration. We know, or at least we can easily be reminded, that we are the others. In times of growing intolerance, polarization and fracture, that is a blessing, and I would say regardless of one's religion or belief. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pedro Caladro. I mean, what a privilege to have you as the director of the President's Office at CAICIID Global Foundation, and to be able to really take us to a deeper understanding of the historical backgrounds, and to also see how far Portugal has come in terms of inclusion. And I've seen how wonderfully you open your doors to so many other communities, and how very included and part of the society in which they now call home has played such a significant role in their own contribution. And then really emphasizing on, of course, that at the center of that is dialogue. If those conversations aren't happening, it's very difficult to build bridges across the divide. So many thanks for that. Our next speaker is Rabbi Michael Studrick, who is the chief rabbi for the Jewish community in Poland, and his focus will be on the current and horrendous crisis of refugees and migrants on the border. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. I wish I could have such a positive report as we've heard so far from Portugal. Unfortunately, at this point, Poland is at the other extreme of the spectrum. I want to say I find myself in a very difficult situation. As you could hear from my accent, I was not born in Poland. I was born in this very strange country called the United States, very far away, in an even stranger place called New York. But I've lived in Poland since 1990. I've been a citizen of Poland for over 15 years, and I feel very connected, very dedicated, and very grateful to Poland. And yet I find myself in a situation to also now be critical. But I just want to emphasize that my criticism is coming from a place of devotion and caring. What is the situation right now on the Polish-Belarusian border? In one word, horrible. The Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, and I'm sorry, I looked for another word than dictator, but at some point we have to just speak the truth. The dictator of Belarus, cynically, politically motivated, is bringing in refugees from Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, you name it, he'll bring it, and dumping them on the border with Poland in order to create a crisis for the European Union. So there's no question that the crisis is fundamentally political. The reaction of the current Polish government is political. But as a clergy, as a rabbi, my responsibility is also to speak out on political issues. But we clergy have no choice but to speak out on humanitarian issues. So this political problem has created a humanitarian crisis. Thousands of refugees are being pushed across the border and then being pushed back. And then it's very hard now to even find out what's really going on because Poland has created an exclusive zone where you need to have special permission to go into that area. So even the NGOs working often have to work outside of the exclusive area, limiting their possibilities of helping, although lots of help is going on. So therefore, what can clergy, religious leaders, anybody do in this kind of situation? In other words, a classic situation of a political clash with humanitarian crisis. Number one, and this is at least from what I've been doing in the last 2 months, speak out at every occasion. I was at a conference about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, on Babi Yar, this horrible murder site outside of Kiev that was done by the Germans, but also spoke there about the horrors of what happened way back when. It's not even so much way back when, but 80 years ago. But also saying, but we also need to talk about what's happening bad today. Or yesterday, I was in a tiny place called Adampol. It's outside of Włodawa, which is also a small town, only a few kilometers from the Polish-Belarusian border. And we were dedicating 2 monuments for 9 Polish Home Army soldiers that were murdered during the war, in the same place where 600 Jews were murdered working in a labor camp. And also talking about there. We have to talk about the tragedy of 78 years ago, but we cannot ignore at the same time the tragedy of what's happening now. And why is that important? Because I suspect a lot of people there didn't want to hear what I was saying. But someone from the local administration walked up to me privately afterwards and said, "Thank you, Rabbi, for saying that." Because we're trying to do what we can on the local level, but we're very limited, and we really appreciate your words. And so we cannot underestimate not a simple, but a strong statement of a few sentences can actually give support, give encouragement, motivation to people who want to help, but may feel lost, alone. And the second thing is, and this really leads into the other one, is being in contact with NGOs working on the ground. Once I was in Adampol yesterday, I had someone, I asked someone from the local NGO dealing in that area to meet me. I wanted to hear firsthand what is happening. Now, on the one hand, I felt kind of selfish. I didn't want to waste her time. But she said, "No, thank you. I want to be able to tell you. Go back to Warsaw and tell them what I'm telling you." So we don't always appreciate the meeting with local activists and the empowerment that we can give them just because we're religious leaders. It's amazing, and we need to do it more. And the third is bringing together faith leaders, religious leaders. And I'm working on a project right now because it's in the process, I'm not going to give details, bringing together religious leaders of 5 different religions of Poland to work together, talking about not the political crisis, but the humanitarian crisis. And hopefully you'll hear something about that in a week or so. And lastly, I just want to have a personal reflection, because obviously I knew I was coming here today. I landed last night, and there I was a few kilometers from the border, from the Polish-Belarusian border. But it's an exclusive zone. I can't go in there. And this is kind of just a reflection of a tremendous irony. The death camp, the German Nazi death camp of Sobibor, is located on the Ukrainian-Polish border, but in order to get there, you have to drive right along the Polish-Belarusian border. And as someone who is involved with the work going on in Sobibor, in the death camp, in terms of a proper commemoration and a museum and protection of mass graves, I was given permission to enter into the exclusive zone to visit Sobibor, which I did after the ceremony in Adampol. But while I was there, I was right on the border. I went right up to the border. It wasn't any place where refugees were coming through. I looked, but actually most of the refugees are crossing north of there. But for me, to look into the forests and know that it's out 200 meters from the border and maybe I can find a refugee there, it was important for me to do that. And as a Jew, when I often will look into these woods, I couldn't help it. I don't like to fantasize, but you kind of think of who might have been running through the woods 80 years ago during World War II. And then yesterday, looking into these woods and having a completely different feeling, not having an imagination of 80 years ago, but understanding what was happening right now in Europe in 2021, and what responsibility we have to help these people immediately. The irony that to visit Sobibor enabled me to go to the border is an irony which I have not yet found the words to express. But we just we need to keep doing more, and most importantly, as everyone else has said, to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rabbi. I was in deep reflection as you gave us your last words of wisdom. And I think if not all of us, most of us will be reflecting on what you said. And it took me back to that place of when I first came to the UK with my family. And I went to go and see if I could get a part-time job whilst I was studying. And most of those doors were closed from me because I did not speak any English, or it just wasn't good enough. But the person who opened that one single door to me was a Jewish businessman who later became almost as a second father figure. And my relationship, my outlook, and my understanding of the Jewish community has totally transformed because of him. Thank you. So I now have the pleasure of introducing Miss Anila Noor. She is the founder and managing director of New Women Connectors, and she will speak about the importance of active participation from an inclusion and equality perspective. But before that, Ms. Noor, what I would really like to know is, what does it actually mean, active participation? What's that all about? What does it look like? What does it feel? And how do we create it?
Thank you, Amina, and thank you, everyone. And I really want to say, Lisbon, thank you so much for hosting me again. I'm so happy to have shared, if you remember, you saw me a few years ago when I was part of European Migrant Advisory Board, working with the City of Amsterdam. And as you said about the active participation, I just remembering so many struggle, so many opportunities and encouragement which I receive. Myself, I'm a refugee from Pakistan and we claim political asylum. And I went through this whole living experience of being refugee in those so-called refugee crises of 2015 and 16. And my first job was, unfortunately, which was given by my city in Netherlands, was to work in a factory. Regardless of my motivation, regardless of my education, regardless of my experience, I was taken as a burden. And being a brown Muslim woman, I still feel so much disappointment why city does not understand the contribution a migrant or refugee can contribute. But I didn't give up. I saw this opportunity with Open Society Foundation and applied there and become a part of European Migrant Advisory Board. At the same year, when I was pushed to work in a factory, I became policy advisor with City of Amsterdam. But it didn't happen in one day. It happened with so many levels of contribution, with so many partners, with so many things. But the thing is that if I give up, I don't continue my active participation or motivation, I could end up doing nothing and just looking after my children at my home. Because being a woman of color, being a migrant woman in Europe is a big struggle. Still today, we are sitting in 2021, and I'm so disappointed by saying that still we are overlooked the shadow. We do not understand migrant and refugee women, how much power and contribution and resilient they are holding. I really want to share my story to give the reflection. Where are these gaps and how we can remove these gaps? And I love when we use bridge. Bridge means two actors, two ends. Bridge can't function while standing one place. It has to be a 2 pillars or 4 pillars. Then this bridge can work. That's why as a New Women Connectors, what we did, we are trying to make an infinity approach, like a process, level of engagement. People, by their experience, who are refugee by themselves, they have to have approaches, they have to have windows, they have to have opportunity to involve in this kind of discussion. This mic, which I'm holding right now, is very important. It's very important so you can listen to me, but also can understand me. But if Amina snatch away this mic from me, my voice will be gone. So that's why this is really important to have this kind of organizations, events, to give the resources to work with refugee-led initiative, migrant-led initiative as a partner. Because when we are trying to create their active participation, we invite them, our close spaces, to speak like I'm speaking, but I would like to work with you as a refugee-led organization, as a partner. We need to challenge and change the perception of beneficiary. We are partners. Beneficiaries, yes, we are, but if we say, okay, we are helping refugee, yes, indeed, but by saying, are we really helping them? Are we really connecting them? And we are really giving this notion, this narration, this description of refugees are vulnerable. They are, because systems are making them vulnerable. But they are more than this. They are doctors, they are engineers, they are policymakers. But unfortunately, especially in Europe, their contribution, their skills, their capacity being overlooked. I'm also part of expert group with the European Commission, where we are trying to give them reflection on their policies. And to understand these policies, like it's been 5 years I'm trying to understand this policy debate, and it's so complex. It's not easy to understand the jargons, the terms, the policy, the system. is really give us a reflection. We need to make a systematic change. Like as I said, infinity approach. Then we can reflect, act, and then recreate. We can't rely on one ingredient. We can't only focus on one component. We have to make a system because we are talking about the change. And change is hard. Trust me, it's so hard. It's so difficult to change our perception, to change our talking, to change our food habits. It's so difficult. But we're really trying to bring understanding. Even we accept, yes, it's not helping, and we need to change. So far, the advocacy which we are doing as a refugee lens, with a feminist lens, with a gender lens, is so difficult. Because we, as a refugee-led initiative, been invited in such kind of events, but we wish to have a partnership. I really wish next time in the dialogue, we sit with you, designing this discussion, designing the themes, and we'd love to contribute. And then if we have more reflection, evaluate it's working or not. So thank you so much for hosting me, and I wish to have more relationship. And thank you, Amina, for having me here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nilanor, for your wonderful contribution and really reminding us the importance of acting, reflecting, and recreating. And from a policy point of view, for me, my thought is, you cannot legislate the attitudes of individuals, irrespective of what policies and procedures that are created and recreated again. And until our attitudes towards people and things that are really important to bringing our common humanity together, then change will be very difficult. So last but not least, I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Dr. Lakshmi Vyas, who is the president of the Hindu Europe. She will speak about the current and ongoing crisis of refugees and really reflect more on what do we need to do collectively together to respond to this reality. Over to you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you very much, Amina, for that introduction. Honorable dignitaries, my brothers and sisters, I'll straight go into the topic of migration and refugees. Migration and displacement are not just about numbers. They also reflect the changing nature of humanitarian crisis. We are becoming more complex and internationalized and thus harder to end. Countries with fragile governments, economies, and geographies ricochet from one crisis to the next. As more people are displaced and for longer periods, the aids and budgets cannot keep up. Every story of migration or displacement begins with an intensely personal drama. Leaving home is a momentous decision, whether a hasty bid to escape death or through the careful balancing of risks and rewards. For some, it is driven by dreams and responsibilities to family or community. For others, it is a desperate bid for survival. The former is usually called migrants and the latter as refugees, even though in real life these categories are often intertwined and fluid. Nearly 71 million people are currently displaced by persecution or conflict, including 26 million people who have crossed international border and become refugees. A far greater number have migrated for more complex reasons. The UN estimates that around 272 million people, that is 3.5% of the population, global population, are international migrants. What makes the people take such risks? We have to understand that no one put their children in a boat unless the sea is safer than the land. No one leaves home unless the home is the mouth of a shark. Many times, due to the border rules, migrants are pushed to seek out more dangerous routes, to evade controls, etc. So I'm not going into all those details of how they cross and how do they meet problems, etc., etc. But of course, the number of people who have been migrants and refugees, they are uncountable now. The UN estimates the journey across the Sahara could be twice as deadly as the Mediterranean. So there are lots of people who have died in the process of migration. Bangladesh to Somalia to Iraq and more describes what life in exile looks like and explores some nascent solutions to the challenges refugees face as they spend longer and longer periods in limbo. Almost 16 million people have been displaced for longer than 5 years, according to UN, including at least 2.4 million Afghans living in Pakistan and Iran, whose refugee crisis has lasted for 4 decades. Yet many refugees are still treated like temporary inconvenience. They are segregated into camps, sometimes unable to move around freely, excluded from public services like health and education. They are supported by parallel aid system. They are prevented from working. Refugees are forced into dependence on aid or exploitative work in the informal economy. Globally, a shrinking population of refugees are able to go back to their countries. As conflicts stretch on, many countries remain volatile long after the crisis. It's going to take years, generations even, to rebuild Sirte and Libya into a place where its people can have their basic needs met and live in safety and freedom. Returnees may face retribution like in Syria, or destitution like in Afghanistan, or ostracism like in Sierra Leone. When they cannot make a life back home, many people contemplate leaving again. Migrants and refugees can have misperceptions or misunderstandings regarding the laws, the customs, and the conditions of their host country. These gaps can be reduced by promoting their participation, moreover, their full non-intervention in decisions that have an impact on their lives. Unless the whites accept the blacks, browns, and yellows, this world will continue the way it is. Think beyond the horizon and rediscover how this place will be more beautiful and happier. Leaders, make someone happy and be empathetic and watch how you feel. When you make someone happy, the feeling one gets is beyond explanation. It is blissful, satisfying, and can cure several ailments and activates the adrenal glands. Try and experience it. The white superiority will continue. It is difficult to disappear. This aspect needs to be taken care of for peaceful amenity. It's very challenging situation for the migrants and the refugees, whether to accept them or not, to help them or not, or let them go back to their country or not. One study concluded that it is the role of all to promote tolerance, open-mindedness, respect for difference, and others' values. Cultural diversity in Europe should be taken as an advantage and celebrated instead of being seen as a negative thing. At the same time, a lot of migrants and refugees also create nuisance and try to destroy the peaceful setup of host nations. We have several examples from Europe. There is need for more opportunities to learn about people from other cultures in Europe, and governments have an important influencing role to establish and facilitate frameworks to aid social cohesion. Valuing multiculturalism is an important aspect for social cohesion. And I conclude by these words: it is the role of all to promote tolerance, open-mindedness, and respect for difference and others' values. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lakshmi. And thank you for bringing us to the very important core of humanity. So solidarity, love, compassion, togetherness. Those are very simple and small acts in which we all have a fundamental role in ensuring that, you know, in order to connect and to feel connected, that needs to happen. Yet I feel we take that for granted. Can we now just give one big round of applause to all our panelists? So you've heard from all our speakers, though we don't have much time for questions, but nevertheless, we still would like to hear from you all. So we would like to give you a few minutes where you're able to reflect with your tables, in your groups, and just come up with either one question for a particular speaker or another question which may be more of a general one. So let's take a few minutes to do that, and we'll gather up. Thank you. Okay. So the sound. So the wonderful sound in this room tells me very much the depth of the conversation and how much unpacking you began to do. Just to say that this is just a teaser, so it doesn't matter whether you get to ask your 100 and more questions on the platform, on the floor, or the ones you'll be able to delve in the next coming days. As we don't have much time, unfortunately, to pick up on your questions, please use this opportunity to interact, to engage, to question, to inquire. And we will close this panel by giving just half a minute or so of a final word or reflection to our panelists. Thank you. Let us begin with Ms. Anila.
Thank you, Amina. I will just request to everyone, because in these 2 days, you're going to discuss so many things in an amazing agenda I was just reviewing. Just be consciously see how we are discussing about refugees, migrant, not to create more tokenization, not to create more cycle of exploitation, but how we can create them a reliable partner as a component. Because if we talk about global compact of refugee and then policies of new pact of migration and integration, the thing is that how we implement. The thing is that the question of how we need to unpack. In this how, who has the control of power, control of resources, and who make the decision. This is really important moment right now when we are also seeing new crisis of Afghanistan. So it shouldn't be crisis for Europe. It shouldn't be crisis from human. It should be element for us to be careful what we are planning for. Thank you so much.
Very hard to sum it up in 30 seconds, but maybe sometimes it's best when it's in only 30 seconds. It's easy sometimes when dealing with such an overwhelming and important moral challenge, as migrants, refugees, to feel that there's really nothing left we can do. That is something we can never permit ourselves the luxury of. There is, even when coming from Poland with the crisis on the border, which looks hopeless, it really is hopeless when we say that statement and we no longer try to do something. There's always something else to do, and we have to try.
I would like to say and remind back to what Her Eminence Claudia said about Portugal. How the migrants and the refugees have been integrated and they have made it inclusive in Portugal. In the same way, I feel that the entire Europe should embrace that sort of an attitude, and that will be good for the migrants and the refugees, and it can solve a lot of issues. Thank you.
To conclude, I would say that intercultural and interreligious dialogue are not rocket science. I think it requires at least three things. The first, it requires conviviality and to make people feel that they are a part of a larger society. And that, of course, has to do with the way you shape your public spaces, your schools, social environment overall. The second, and it's more political, I think it requires method, vision, and of course the means in order to put that into practice. And finally, I think it takes time. It's not something that happens, in a week or a month or a year. It is a long time commitment. But I think that at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. It's possible. Some countries are doing it. So let's build on that. Thank you.
And lastly, can we hear from Ms. Afshan Khan?
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I would say three key points. First, as religious leaders and networks, how do you listen and engage with young people, particularly refugees and migrants in the community? and request their participation and engagement for better integration. I think that's critical to listen to their voices and to support them in the communities where they are. Secondly, I think when it comes to the policy level, there have been some very strong recommendations and good examples. And here too, how is that? Including signing the Refugee and Migrant Pact by governments. And that's where I think, again, as religious leaders, you have huge influence. And lastly, I would say, ultimately, the vision of a peaceful, harmonious society that integrates better and supports those seeking asylum. There's a tremendous role to play, and your networks are vast and powerful. Please use them in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to leave you with just one word. No culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. Inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It is the key to growth. We are less when we do not include, and it is our obligation of every person born in a safer room to open the door when someone is knocking. I know that room has been opened for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this engaging and truly inspiring session. We believe that it has already initiated some new ideas and inspired our participants to prepare for discussions which will take place in the next part of our program. Now I would like to announce a short coffee break that is waiting outside for you, and you will kindly be asked to return to the plenary hall in 30 minutes. But before that, I would also like to announce that virtual participants are, of course, encouraged to grab a cup of coffee if they wish. You have the possibility to engage and do some networking in the online platform. In the meantime, please make sure that you join our next session. So don't stay in this using this link, but join the next session that is coming. Two more announcements. We would like to remind our guests who have requested an official PCR test due to their return journey tomorrow to approach our colleagues at a hospitality desk. The tests are taking place 10 to 12. And also, a very important reminder, we have a group picture that is taking place now. So I would kindly ask my colleagues to support me with giving a few instructions how we are going to do that. Thank you so much for your attention and patience. Enjoy.